Well, I'm excited about the Healing Frequency Music Project because so many people are suffering now in our world. And even though we have some things we can do about it, medicine, psychiatry, church, people are still suffering. And I was always looking for something that I could do to help that. And when I discovered these 7 frequencies that have had a profound effect on humanity, it kind of blew my mind because 396, for example, when people listen to that, suddenly if they're feeling shame or guilt or insecurity, suddenly that just moves away and opens them up to be touched by God.
What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Welcome to Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and I'm here right now with world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. For over 40 years, Earth-Friendly Products have brought you the greenest home products for all your family needs. Go to ecos.com, that's ecos.com.
And speaking of sponsors, take your mind over on a literary journey to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from many of the famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told.
All right, Eddie, do you like music?
Oh my God, is that even a question? Of course I love music, and actually, who doesn't?
Well, tonight's guest uses music to heal and motivate a hurting world, and while inspiring others in all generations to do the same.
Oh, that's right. Michael Tyrrell is an author, visionary, composer, and friend of God. And Tony, now he's a new friend of ours. He's going to be joining us here today on Truth Be Told.
Don't forget about his book and CD, Wholetones, part of the Healing Frequency Project, and also one of our new sponsors.
Oh, that's exciting. So check out sweetwholetones.com. That's sweetwholetones.com, where you can learn more about the 7 ancient healing frequencies that can benefit you. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome musical healer Michael Tyrrell.
Michael, welcome to the show.
Tony, Eddie, it's an honor to be on with you guys today. I've been thinking about it all week. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And, you know, it's great to, because I'm a musician and Eddie was a dancer growing up. So music has been a part of all of our lives, it sounds like. But we don't realize how much music can heal. And I know Eddie's a big fan of frequency, and I think you guys are going to get along tonight. So talk about Wholetones. Talk about how you discovered that tones, you know, not just the music itself, but the tones of music heal people.
Yeah, first I'd just like to say that music in its own right, I mean, obviously has, you know, a quantum effect on the physical body. And for a long time, though, as a musician, there's times when there's an intuitive nature that tells you something's wrong with something without you being able to have the discernment at that time to figure out what that is. And for the longest time as a musician, I knew there was something wrong with music, but I couldn't figure out what it was.
Right.
And, you know, all of us, regardless of what the instrument is, when we first go to a music store, you know, they sell us, you know, in my case, a guitar package. They give you a tuner. And you tune your guitar to that tuner, and voila, you know, you're a musician. But nobody ever questioned the tuner. And I did. I questioned the tuner. I said, wait a minute. What? It's like those guys in the magazines you read. They say by age 30, you should have crow's feet in the corner of your eyes. Well, I'm 55, and I don't have any. So obviously that doesn't work. So then the same way with the tuner, it's like, so you're telling me that this is the only way music can be interpreted is if we tune our instrument to this tuning. And when I did some research, which I think you guys will, if you haven't read the book yet, Joseph Goebbels is responsible for what we call the American Standard Tuning, and Joseph Goebbels was the right-hand liaison to Adolf Hitler that was in, charge of propaganda and mind control,
Right.
and thought that it would be cool to use 440 beats as a way to anesthetize the population and get them to receive negative impulses. So when I realized that our music had been, for the most part, most tuners that you see are, they're calibrated to 440 beats or 440 hertz. So when I realized that even though music is, of course it is, it's beautiful, and not all of it is in that standard tuning of 440 equals A.
Right.
Most of it is. And it took me a long time, guys, to understand that even though music is beautiful, there was something that was, kind of a little bit nefarious behind the whole process, because even though the music is beautiful, it's killing us.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I knew that something had to change, and, I want to leave you guys plenty of time to ask questions, but part of that change was that I realized that I needed to find out a tuning that was beneficial to the human body on a cellular level.
So before Wholetones, before you found out this process and this program, what type of tones and music that you felt actually was more negative, maybe been negative in your life, that now is different once you realize the tones that really help?
That's a great question, and a lot of it, again, it's pure ignorance. We're like Pavlov's, we just repeat after what we've been modeled, and so, obviously my standard tuning was the better part of early on in my career. I tuned to A equals 440, and I also realized that as much as I love music and as much of a nirvana that you feel as a player when you're moving through your instrument or speaking through your instrument, there again was that something missing. What changed it for me originally was hearing some of the great composers like Mozart, Bach, for example, that had fallen into the Ernst Chladni type of methodology of 432 hertz or beats per cycle. And what was interesting about 432 is that it worked well with somatics, so you could get these beautiful geometrical shapes in sand or metallic particles by simply, exciting that with a specific frequency. So I noticed, some of the things I'm noticing now in multiples of things, for example, like plant growth, things that happen with people, especially autistic children, certain things that 432 is very favorable to the body. And there's a lot of, in the blogosphere, there's a lot of people that, as usual, there's a war against which one's better. All I'm saying is 432 is positive for the body. It was discovered by Ernst Chladni. 444 was discovered by a man named King David. And I think that his reference was a little higher, perhaps, than Ernst Chladni. When I discovered 444 hertz, that's when my life changed dramatically, the lives of many of my friends and many people around the world now, from obviously an energetic standpoint and a healing standpoint.
That's a great segue. I was going to ask you, is there a difference between, let's say, the energy and a frequency?
Well, let's put it this way. This is the best way I could explain it. Let's say, for example, that it would be really scary on this broadcast, but let's say the three of us didn't have the ability to hear, that we were deaf. Mm-hmm. With the proper frequencies, only 10% of what you're hearing is really responsible for much of anything. It's what you're feeling. And so it's what's energetically happening through the frequency. And your frequency changes matter. And so on a cellular level, when you're listening to Wholetones, for example, whether you have no hearing, slight hearing, great hearing, volume is irrelevant. You can play it loud or soft, barely audible or blasting your brains out, whatever, it's still going to do the same thing. So yes, these frequencies have a palpable effect on matter, and so therefore we're seeing even from the samples, which I think is great. Most people say, don't tell them that. Well, of course I'm going to tell them that. It's all about helping people.
Right.
Many people have gone to the website, which tonight is sweetwholetones.com. I love that. And when they go there, there's music samples, and I would say probably at least 25% of the people that have responded to us have told us before they even purchased the hard copy or the digital download that they had already received healing from listening to the 10-minute sample.
Wow.
Which I think is extraordinary.
Yeah, I definitely think it's extraordinary too. So just so that I'm on the same page, energy and frequency are the same thing in a way, or not the same thing in a way, in your opinion?
Yes, I say they are.
Okay.
I say they are.
And would you say everything carries a frequency, whether it's super, super dense and low, or really, really high, fast and pure? But everything.
Oh my, absolutely. Not only does everything have a frequency, everything has a resonant frequency. And whether it's, like you said, solid, whether it would be what we would call, it's so funny how everything comes in threes, sixes, and nines. But in the three categories, it's funny, we're body, soul, and spirit. We listen to most stereos, add 5 bands, and it changes a bit, but it's bass, mid, and treble. And it's interesting how frequencies affect those elements in the same way, i.e., lower frequency response affects the body or the physical. What we would call mid-range frequencies have a tendency to affect more of the thought, will, and emotions, i.e., yo-yo ma. And you play certain notes of that cello, and people become a part, And then the same in the spirit realm. Once you get into a certain magnification of the higher frequencies, what we would call treble in our audio world, it appears to affect the spiritual side of things. And so, absolutely, they're the same thing. But even so much so that even things that we wouldn't consider having frequencies have frequencies.
So most people are inundated, or they get into a habit, a regime, a pattern, if you will, of watching the news, which I personally think is a low frequency, or getting involved in gossip at the water cooler, or getting fixated on an old story. That's all dense, like Dorito frequency, when you could be up there in the buffet of fresh fruits and vegetable frequencies.
Well, and the scarier part of that is, and it's truthful, but it's the part that people don't talk about, is there's a lot of times when even our culture, we're becoming a self-perpetuating prophecy because of the negativity that we constantly, whether it's on social media, of course, whether it's the spoken word, because life and death is in your voice, the spoken word, the frequency, what you say. You've seen it before. You might not have been able to isolate it, but if you've ever had a car, and you say, oh, my car's a piece of junk, it never works correct. Well, you have the bills to prove it because you're speaking to matter and you're telling it that it's a pile, and that's what it will become. And so when we speak, how many times, especially with where you guys run, how many times have you heard all of these different things that people are purporting and saying it's the end of the world and it's all these things? You can only speak so much negativity to something before it dies. There's a real amazing experiment now that's made its way through most of social media of 2 sides of an orange. And one person, in the spirit of Masaru Emoto, speaks positive things to one side of the orange, and then concurrently speaks negative things to the other side. The side that they spoke negatively to, it's rotten within minutes, and the other side looks like it's just freshly cut. So, yeah, what we say is what we get.
So that is also applicable if you take the same orange, the healthy side of it, and you put it in your body, and then you bitch about it, about gaining weight, and I'm puffy. I bet most people's abdominal area is more dense than certain other areas of their body. Like, I don't have any negative resistance about my fingers, but I definitely let my stomach have it once in a while. Tray of cookies.
Yeah, there's a tray of cookies sitting next to me.
And who set them here?
So it's closer to you, not to me.
But who set them?
Did.
Thank you, the owner. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I have a question, because you were talking about healing secrets of the Bible, which I find fascinating, because it's not just the Christian belief, but the Buddhist and other religions around the world, a lot of use chants, tones, and I find it fascinating that that's one of the similarities in a lot of religions. Do you find that?
Yes, I do. And there, like anything else, it can get to the place where, where there's, the thing that bothers me the most is terrorism, no matter where you find it. Anyone that is negative, regardless of what they believe or how they force what they believe upon other people, is a form of terrorism. I've made no bones about my persuasion would be what we would call Christian.
Right.
Or Fox
However,
News.
But we're hearing those stories all of the time. Again, by people, and let's go the other way, the receiving end. People. God so loved the world. That's what it says, the ethnos. It doesn't say the Christian alone. It doesn't say the Buddhist. God loves everybody.
Correct.
And that's why he would do what he did. But the point is that a lot of people that are listening think about that just the the veritable religious soup of, different people listening in to this conversation, to the frequencies and the samples, they're getting healed. I'm giving God the glory for it. But we do, in text, have multiple people are claiming healings from all kinds of different modalities. Mine's a simple directive.
So when you say simple directive, you're saying simple directive, it came from God to you, and when you channel it, I'll use that word if that's applicable.
Sure.
So when you channel the light of God into you and through you, and then you create these whole tone frequencies that then go out and heal other people, you're saying that is an extension of the God in you and the God above and below, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so can I ask you a question that will sound slightly off the beaten path?
Of course.
Okay. How old were you when you came into understanding whole tones and the powerful frequency of music? How old were you?
That's a great question, and not difficult at all. It was exactly. I mean, again, there's always ripples before the wave, but I would say that safely, this revelation has been germinating for the last 19 years of my life, and I'm 55 now.
Okay.
So.
And so you know what I would love to see. This is I think the best advertisement ever. You're a good-looking guy, and it would be fun to see pictures of you before you came into the awareness of whole tones.
You know what? And we can do that, and that is a fantastic idea for so many reasons.
Yeah, because I think the whole tones is an infusion of the high pure frequency, and then you're helping us build our atoms, cells, and molecules up.
Correct.
And so I mean this with love, Michael, you were probably way more dense energy then from the inside out, doing the best you could, serving God, serving the world, if you will. And I would imagine there was a lot more efforting back then before you woke up to what you know now. So it'd be fun to see a before and after picture of that.
That would be interesting. We need to do that.
That is a fantastic idea and a fantastic way to look at it. Yes. Yes and yes.
And so would you call yourself a Christian?
Before?
Yeah, before and after.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I would say like anything else, though. I mean, regardless of what your religious background is, if your theology isn't in a constant state of change, you're probably not as mature as you think you are. I don't think there's enough time for me to learn all the things that I want to learn. And I think that the one thing I'm learning most of all is just getting out of the way. And it's embarrassing that I'm 55, and it took me till I was 53 to realize the most important revelation of all when it comes to God communicating or articulating demand. The biggest thing is for you to get out of his way and let him do what he wants to do with you. Instead of always trying to tell God or beg God or ask God or try to give him a directive or here's the box I want you to operate in. The best thing is like a river. If you find a river and it has a strong current and you've got some time. These things. There's certain ones of them that affect everybody different, but there's certain ones that affect everybody plus minus the same variant. 396 or the open door, the beginning one, it's an opening frequency for a reason. If you do frequency work, and I'm sure you do, you realize that when someone subjects themselves to healing, the very first thing is their initial thought, believe it or not, is they're not worthy to receive it. That's number one.
That's
right.
a
classic.
Big one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's classic because they're coming for healing, but they don't feel worthy to receive healing or to be touched by God in any way because they're too busy fixating on everything they've done that's wrong. The very first thing that 396, the Hertz does, is it puts you in a place of receiving, in a place of where shame and guilt disappears, and you realize the fruitlessness of self-destruction, and you realize the possibilities of God's infinite healing for you at that moment. So that also has if you want to push your feel-good button, my goodness, if you're having a crummy day, and you need to be uplifted and get that, depressed means to push down. To get that feeling off your back, put on 396. Now, here's the cool thing. When I work, create, CEOs have given us, we have just a bevy of information from, guys that work in that office environment, and they lose, they become, there's procrastination, not feeling motivated, not feeling focused, not feeling creative. The second one, 417 hertz, which is known as the Desert Soldier. And when I put that on, 12 hours later, I'm still typing, and that is not an exaggeration. I wrote the whole book listening to that one frequency. And I'm telling you what, if you're in a cyclic thing where you're lazy or unproductive, or you've got like this whatever the stigma is about doing something, if you put that frequency on, it's almost like it just blows it out of your brain. You just start working. Yeah. So those are the two that I always start with for obvious reasons. If I'm feeling uninspired or if I'm feeling bummed. But honestly, I got to say, with your question, before Wholetones, I was bummed out a lot. After, not so much at all.
But I have a feeling maybe part of the reason you were bummed out a lot back then was you were probably more of an empath and a sensitive person than you knew that you were. So as a healer, when we're younger, we have a tendency to go out and attract to us a lot of broken people so that we can heal them and fix them.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you and I are within a year of each other in age. Michael, where were you born and raised, out of curiosity?
I was born in Clearwater, Florida, actually, right on the coast.
Oh, wow. Another Southern boy. I don't know why.
Yahoo!
Yeah. They call Texas the South, but really Florida's technically the South, too.
Yeah.
So here's my question for you. In the time, like I was born in 61, and so in that era, that decade, and going into the 70s, it was a generation where the parents taught the children to be seen and heard.
Not heard.
Oh, yeah, to be seen and not heard.
Right.
That's right.
Not heard.
To
right.
be invisible, to be cheap labor, for lack of a better way to say it. And there was a whole lot of do as I say and not as I do. So I find that people in our generation have a real tendency to not be open to receive, as you spoke about earlier. My question for you is, would you say, and we have a young person in the audience with us today over here, we have intern Jacob here.
Say hi, Jake.
Hello.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and
hello.
And how old are you, Jacob?
I am 22. Okay,
so this is going to be a fun question. Have you noticed that young people, not all of them, because we have a nice exemplary young man here, have you noticed that most people in their 20s and early 30s now, it's easier for them to receive because their programming and the way they were raised was different than the way we were raised?
I'd have to say I do notice that. I mean, there's obviously differences in our upbringing and theirs, but for the most part, and interesting that he's 22, which that number is an interesting number, by the way.
Yeah, because every single one of your CDs is 22 minutes and 22 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that word is, like 222 or 2222. It's one of the prophetic numerology interpretations has got sufficiency in the midst of insufficiency, which I find fascinating, but that has nothing to do with what I was going to tell him. But the point is that, yeah, I mean, in a word, yes, I do feel that that they're a lot open, and I think that a lot of that, finding your voice is one of the biggest things that we can do. Once we do that, I mean, it changes everything. And when we were little, as you said, we didn't really have a voice, and most of our belief systems were indicative of what our parents believed. If they liked a politician, we liked a politician. If they liked a certain food, we liked a certain food. But I think there's a lot more. I am reticent to use the word independence, but I think this generation now is a bit more independent than we were.
Yeah, and a little bit more freedom to say, I'm not going to eat my spinach. I'm not going to do that.
And not get your tushy whooped.
Tushy, you wouldn't even have a head to walk around and carry. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet's Truth Be Told show, and we're here today with Michael Tyrrell. He has a Wholetones, which is about the Healing Frequency Music Project, and I'm Eddie Connor.
And I'm Tony Sweet.
And I'm Jacob Cabral.
The intern. And the website is sweetwholetones.com. That's sweet as in Tony Sweet, whole as in Whole Foods, and tones as in tones. .com. I almost said tunes.
Well, I have actually, before we get any farther, we have somebody in the chat room that actually has a question, and I want to go ahead and address it before we get into our next segment. We have somebody in the chat room says, ask Michael about people that working in an office environment. It says, does it work if I play it in my office? Which I'm assuming it probably would be a great place to have if they allow you to play it.
You could do an exorcism with this music in an office environment.
Let me be really honest with you. I have seen things that have blown my mind. The answer is absolutely, and usually that's how it works in companies where everybody gets it. Like as far as productivity, they'll play 417, and then the whole office gets cracking. But we had a really interesting thing, that kind of a clandestine, bizarre. But my wife and I and some friends were in the Virgin Islands, and we were on one of those. It's like a quick ferry, they call it, and but it was extremely wavy, and people were just coming on. They were coming apart. Everybody was getting seasick, and it was one of those. Just, oh my God, this is just really nasty. So one of my friends said, "Why don't you put the Wholetones on?" So I put one of the frequencies on. I'm not kidding you. Thank goodness we videotaped. It's poor video, but we did it on iPhone. We watched people lay their heads down. Everybody in the entire ferry fell asleep. And I was like, I started to cry. I did, because I wasn't expecting that. But they all went to sleep, and nobody was puking anymore. Nobody was like holding their stomachs. They went to sleep. They woke up when we got there, and everybody got off. And it was like, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, think about this too. Like frequencies, this is probably really important. I don't know if I've shared this live before, but one of the problems with frequency work is, if you go on YouTube at all, they'll have like some sine wave generator, with a frequency generator. It's kind of like, it's the most annoying sound you've ever heard. It's kind of like when the TV used to go off the air at 1 o'clock. And so what I realized I had to do was make the frequency itself beautiful. And then the music is just kind of like the frosting on the cake. And so I was at this outdoor thing where I was speaking at, and they had an outdoor tent, and they were playing the Wholetones in the tent. But to use the restroom, you had to go all the way up to the top of this hill or whatever, and then they had the toilets there and all that good stuff. And so by the time I had gotten away from the tent and away from the time array of the PA system, all I could hear when I was in the restroom, I couldn't hear the music. All I could hear was the frequencies. So it'll permeate a building with no problem at all. So thank you for that question.
Well, I guess the only people that were mad whenever you were using the frequencies on the boat were the fish, because they weren't getting fed anymore.
Right.
But luckily, they have a way more pure frequency than we do.
Probably.
And also, I want to ask you a question, because as a musician, you not only let us enjoy the tones, but you really brought the music behind the tones. Also, and did you write all the music or did you have somebody that you collaborated with?
Here's the best part of all. Everything on there is one take, and everything is spontaneous.
Wow.
So I wrote nothing. I received everything. And it was like, you guys know what you do. If someone asks you to do it a different way, and like let's do a radio show in a radically different way, it might throw you for a loop. So when I got into the studio, I realized that I had no lead sheets or anything written out, and basically I had a pocket full of tones. So what I did was I sat down cross-legged on the floor, and all the musicians were just staring at me, but they know I'm a little out there, so I told them they were getting paid. That made them feel better. And I said, listen, I'm just going to sit here and listen to these tones, and there's music in there. There's music in these tones, and when it comes to the surface, I'm going in after it, and I'm just going to start shouting out stuff to you, and I want you to start playing it. And so after we did that, after like that construct came together, the next time around we recorded it, and that was it. So each of those 22s were not planned that way. That's exactly how they came out. That's exactly how they began and ended. And they were all first takes. And the best part of it is it was all spontaneous, and none of us had line of sight, which I'm sure that Eddie will appreciate. In other words, this had to be something that was divinely directed, and everyone had to be in a place where they could spiritually receive organically from God, or it never could have happened. You've heard the music. There's dead stops. Nobody was directing anything that was visible, and we couldn't see each other because we were all in ISO booths in different parts of the building. So that's how it happened.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
To especially one take. I know too many
All of it
musicians
was.
that.
But can you imagine how many takes could you do of 22? Your fingers would be falling off.
That's what I'm saying. I was just like, wow.
Yeah, right? You're like the Melissa Etheridge of Wholetones, because when she'll go in, really, she goes in and she does it live. I mean, every album you hear,
true.
every single song you hear is usually the first, but no more than the second take. It's all done with all the musicians in the same room at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so this, I mean, you just killed it with this. So,
well, but can you imagine though that once you've seen what's possible, the old way is so arcane now. I can't. It's almost embarrassing that that's how I used to do it. I'd sit around, and I'd put the right word combinations together. It's better just to show up at the studio and trust God, man, and plug in. I mean, it was awesome.
It must be a great feeling to, you said you're 55, to actually have the trust in yourself and trust in God to just do it instead of constantly questioning, because most people, like we say, they question or they don't allow themselves to do it. Another question that comes in, and this is also, I think, a great question
in the chat room,
that they're bringing up about pets. Have you noticed pets, the response differently with your
overwhelming?
Really?
Overwhelming. And the good thing is that on the and now it's sweetwholetones.com. If you go to that website and there's the testimonial, there's probably 1,000 or more on there, but a good portion of them are pets. And since I'm a huge pet guy, when these things happen, you don't expect these things, guys. This is all like this is the extras that you don't expect. Pet owners that had dogs that had separation anxiety when they would go to work, they leave the tones on, they come home, the dog would just be sitting in the same spot, happy. They turn the music off, the dog would start pacing back and forth and barking till they turned it back on. I mean, endless stuff. Had one cat that had tumors, and it was too expensive to do the tumors, and the tumors disappeared. I mean, The list goes on and on. Yeah, I mean, listen. Anything that is living, and even things that are if you think about it, all right, like my watch. I'm looking at my watch right now. It has a quartz movement. So obviously, things we don't expect frequencies out of have great, powerful, strong, stable frequencies, like quartz, for example. And it's funny, in the Bible it says, if you don't worship me, the rocks will cry out. Well, if you have ears to hear, the rocks are crying out, and they're crying out in your wristwatch. And they're telling it what time it is. That's right. And that's how your watch is. I mean, it has a quartz movement, or maybe a ruby movement, or whatever, diamond, whatever your watch is. Mine's a Tyrrell, I'm looking at it right now. We don't expect these things. And the best part of it is that it sounds like alchemy. It sounds like freak show. It sounds like, the bottom line is, think if 50 years ago, if we went in, the three of us, to a design shop and we said, hey, we got an idea. We're going to put this box in the wall, and we're going to put food in it, and it's going to get super hot. We boil water in it, but it'll never get hot. It'll be cold. They would think we were nuts, but it's a microwave.
It's true.
But it's just frequency. The radios that people are, that right now, no one could hear the show without frequency. We're being pelted right now. We can't see radio waves, gamma, EMFs. I mean, we're getting shot through right now with invisible beams we can't even see. But yet it's weird to us. To me, it's not weird. You couldn't have a conversation with me or hear a conversation without frequency.
Well, in the 1800s, the late 1800s, early 1900s, Marconi, who was the first person who brought radio waves to the masses, his family put him in a mental institution because he said, you don't understand. You can have voices coming out of the box. And you can acquiesce to certain frequencies and do this and do that. And they're like, child, we're going to put you in a nut house. And they literally put him in a nut house until he created the radio. And then they're like, oh, we're going to get rich. Let's take him out of the nut house.
No, but isn't that how it always is with, we get angry at the things we don't understand. And so we put those in a different folder. We either make them angelic or demonic, or we have some kind of a caste system for the things we can't get our minds wrapped around, and if we don't understand it, it's evil or it's too good for us to understand. Instead of pressing through and letting it become, as an inventor, I mean, over the years, hopefully we'll get to talk more. in the future. But, I have several inventions that I'll be releasing in the next 24 months and other things that when you understand that, you have to have thick skin. I mean, there's people around you that they think you're nuts. and you have to have thick skin, and you just got to go, they're telling me I can't do it while I'm doing it. Who's right? I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. And so that's my point, though. All these people, Nikola Tesla, my favorite, I mean, the guy was abused. He was, the powers that be usurped all of his, designs and whatever. But, I'm rereading his autobiography for about the 50th time now. But you see his heart in all of it, and it was still pure. After he got ripped off and demeaned, and his whole thought of it was that he had lived in continuous rapture because of the thoughts in his mind. And he said that I believe if I'm correct, he said, if my thoughts were the equivalent of labor and I've devoted most of my waking hours to them, if life was interpreted only by divine performance in specified times according to rigid rules, then he would call himself the worst of idlers.
Oh my
and
God.
So if you're an intuitive, if you're a creative, or if you're like you two, myself, or an inventive sort,
right.
Or a musician or what have you, there's always that place where you're operating out of a different capacity. And life is, it's so funny. Somebody said the other day, they told me they were a control freak. And I said, no, you're just a freak because you're never really in control of anything. Because we're not.
That is hilarious.
Well, you gave me an idea, which we've all known, but you articulated it in such a way that sort of gave me this big visual. I remember growing up, again, in the world of you are to be seen and not heard and do as I say and da-da-da-da-da. I was the kid who in my mind and in my heart went in the different direction than the Klan. I was the kid that wanted to talk to my black friends and my Mexican friends and my Latino friends and the German girl who was a transfer student from Germany. And I was told not to. I was told I wasn't allowed to. So whenever I saw my first interracial couple in the 70s in a tiny town in North Carolina, I watched both boys and girls terrorize the F out of those kids. And it was heartbreaking. And so if we will follow our heart, we won't be trapped in that box that so many other people are. And even when we're taught to stay in the box and keep our mouth shut, I believe the heart can break free from that and help anybody, uplift anybody, heal anybody if we're holding them in that space pure enough. And it feels like that's what you're doing with Wholetones.
What a beautiful way to articulate. Wow. Thank you. It really is. And it's funny back, and again, we're very, very close in age. I remember when the song Good Vibrations came out by the Beach Boys, right? And I thought, we're at the age of Aquarius, everything's really hip and really cool. I didn't catch it, obviously, as a kid, what good vibrations or good vibes were. Now it's like the epicenter of my life, and I watch continuously. It's a social experiment. I can go into any restaurant, store. I'm actually, right now, I'm in a health food store. They were kind enough to let me use one of their quiet rooms here. But my point is I can go up to anyone. I've almost made a game out of it. The most miserable, hopeless person, I will not leave that person's presence until they're smiling and hugging me.
Yes.
And the point is that if somebody said it one time, and I said it, and then they got really mad at me, but I said, listen, if you love the hell out of everything, eventually hell goes. If you love people that are miserable, that misery can only last so long. Love conquers all. So if you keep love, like you said, man, I grew up in that same dynamic of all of a sudden there goes the neighborhood, and then we would have blacks and Hispanics and everybody moving in, and they ended up being my best friend. Same thing.
And the thing I love about that is when you are friends with more people than your own people, more different colored clans than your own clan, that's where you really learn. That's where I think we honestly connect to that non-physical world.
Right.
And, the thing I love, I'm writing novels about the 1800s and slavery and different things, and it's fiction and nonfiction. But the thing that I find so phenomenal is what helped the African-American community break free from everything that was done to them was music.
That's what kept them together.
In the fields, and outside of the fields, anything they could pick up and turn into an instrument and singing the hymnals. All of that. I mean, and they move it into the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when Aretha was singing R.S.P.E.C.T. And so that was another way for all of us to come together as one through their music. And then all of the good stuff started slipping through the cracks. And we're like, look at us now. Well, hell, look at us now. We're still effed up. But it's still way better than it was. And there's more people like us, not that we're perfect, but there are more heart-open people like us and heart-opened people listening to what we're doing right now that will go out and shine that whole tone frequency onto other people too.
Wow. Yeah, I find it fascinating that, again, one of the scriptures that I remember reading, basically it's the Apostle Paul, and he says, hey, listen, what kind of sacrament is it if you only love the people that love you? I mean, that's huge. Yeah. Because you know what? Love's a risk, isn't it? It's a risk. You put it all out there and you might get nothing in return, but if it was really love, you weren't looking for one in the first place. And that's what makes it so beautiful, is that if you just you love everybody, you don't have to know what they're all about. You don't have to know their likes or dislikes or their social economic level or their religion. You just love everybody, and wonderful things start to happen.
Yeah, you learn. You don't ever
Big time.
You don't learn anything from the people that raised you once you get past 7 years old, because they're just going to keep regurgitating their cycle on you until you break out of it. This is good stuff. Where do you see yourself and where do you see Wholetones being 5 years from now, Michael?
That's a phenomenal question. I can't disclose too much because I already know a lot of what's coming next, and I can't say anything about it yet, as much as I would love to. There's obviously more frequencies than just 7.
Right.
You know, at least 22 that I know are beneficial, and so that the obvious progression of that is that sometime in 2016, you'll be seeing another one of those. But there's a lot of other inventions and things that are about, you know, one thing I think I am allowed to mention to you is that light is just basically harmonics of the audio frequencies that few months. Wholetones Chroma, which is a combination on Blu-ray of chromotherapy and audio therapy at the same time. And I think that people are going to be quite amazed with what happens when they get a hold of this. And so that's all I can say about it right now. But it marries light and sound together, and I think you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out what it's going to be like. It's going to be an in-home chromotherapy, color therapy, and audio therapy right in your own home in front of your own TV monitor.
I want to ask you, we have about 4 minutes left, but I want to ask you,
sure.
Not just as a musician, but as a creator. You said you like to invent, and I want to know what is your ideas? Where do your creations come from? In your sleep, imagination? Where most things pop into your head? Is it tell us your backstory to that?
We're going to have to do this again. There is so much. What a great question. Well, the first thing I always, I tend to mention a lot of water elements simply because I noticed that from a young age when I would get into, I used to say, I think it was Leonardo da Vinci who said, I must drink so I can think. I used to go into the shower and I used to say, I'm going to get a little water on my head. That didn't necessarily mean I was going in there to wash my hair. It meant I was going in there to hear.
Wow.
Yeah. because his voice is the sound of many waters. And there's something about the elemental part of who we are, the 70% plus minus of us that's really seawater plasma, and about how we can excite that element. And I've always found that creation was a current, was a river. And like I said before, I never strive. I never, ever go, you know what, I've got to sit down today and do this. I wait for it. It comes to me. I sat on the floor with headphones on. I sit in my room and I wait. And then whatever comes, I write feverishly until I feel that I've rode that current as far as it needs to go for that day. And 9 times out of 10, something amazing comes out of that sense of impulse, which is, again, for me, always connected to water. And maybe that's why I live in Florida, and maybe it's why I love it. If you guys were looking at me at a satellite where I live, I would be on the edge. You could find me. I'd be right where the water is, right where the sand ends and where the water begins. But yeah, inspiration always comes from me. I never go necessarily looking for it. I wait on it to flow.
That's great. Well, I think everybody that's listening, and not only to the live show but to our podcast, go get these CDs, because they're people go to therapy taking medication, and I think we should try what's natural first and what the universe is giving to us for free.
Especially since pharmaceuticals are the second leading cause of death in the United States.
Right. And but go
Boy,
to
you guys are awesome.
sweet.wholetones.com, sweet.wholetones.com, and get the CDs and the book, because I think this is where we need to be for the next stage of this world where we're going. And Eddie, please step in as an intuitive on how you feel, what frequency and tones are important for our spirit.
Yeah, we all gravitate to them. We can't get away from them, in my opinion. Everything is energy, tones, harmonics, frequencies. Unfortunately, more people than not are listening and attracting to them denser frequencies that continue to perpetuate them being stuck in the hamster wheel of life, for lack of a better way to say it. And we do that because we're not born in a box, but we're trained to be in a box. And we're also trained not to step outside of that box, because if you do, there's going to be all kinds of civil unrest, first of all with your family, then the community, and then the world at large. And when you slip away from those people in that old pattern, and you deliberately, purposefully, consciously sit down and you put your headphones on and you listen to this and you tune into things that feel this high, fast, and pure, not only does your heart open, but it opens safely so that you're vibrating outside of the limited familiar box. What are the last 4 letters in the word familiar? Liar.
Ooh.
Family lies. You can't do that. Who do you think you are? You're a redneck sissy boy. You can't go out to L.A. and do radio.
Right on.
And so as you deliberately, purposefully attune your thoughts, feelings, and frequencies, the 2 things that feel this good, the heart opens in a safe, loving, non-threatening way. And then doors and windows open for you that did not open for you before. The habit will be, as soon as they open, you get excited and you go right back to the old thinking process. And when you do that, you turn your ass around, which is an acronym for accidental self-sabotage. You turn your ass around, and then you go right back to listen to your Wholetones again, and you keep making that the new habit, the new regime, and everything that goes with it. And that's why I think Wholetones, the sound of healing, is so important. That's just my perspective.
Well, Michael, on our way out, give us your thought, and again, tell us how people can get your product.
Well, the guys at Barton Publishing are the guys that I teamed up with to get this out to the world, and am still in shock and awe of what's happened so far. But again, the only one I'm going to mention today on this show is sweetwholetones.com, because you know what? This is for your listeners tonight. We want people to hear it for the first time on your show. And they can go to that website, and of course there's an offer, but there's a whole lot more than just an offer. There's actually tons of free stuff, lots of samples, and hours and hours of videos, so they can really understand intelligently and spiritually what they're purchasing if they decide to do so. All I can tell you is that I never anticipated what's happened with Wholetones, other than I remember the night when I put the headstock of my guitar on my mother's abdomen and began to play without any Wholetones recordings yet. It was the genesis and incarnation of this working. And the doctors had reported she had a mass on her pancreas, and after I played, when they opened her up, that mass was gone. And that's all I can say, other than the fact that I know that it works, and I know that I think that everybody would benefit in some way from this, even, especially if they're having, the physical, but also psychological, emotional stuff too. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. And the people that go to sweetwholetones.com, let us know. Well, give us some of your testimonies. Tell us your thoughts and what you're feeling once you listen to this amazing set of CDs. And we want to thank Michael Tyrrell for being on the show. And please come back. And we hope that you come back and all the success in the world, because this was a great interview. We really enjoyed it.
And on a weird side, and we have 10 seconds left. Pay attention to Europe or the UK, Michael, because it feels like you're bleeding over into those countries in a way that's faster than here. But you get it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Michael.
God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Bless you too.
Let's
And we'll
talk soon.
Oh, I hope so. All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. What we're going to do is we're going to take a break, and we hope you guys go to sweetwholetones.com.
What is that website again?
Sweetwholetones.com. All right. Don't go anywhere. We're going to play another video of Michael, and we will be back with Jack
Rourke.
All right. Don't go anywhere.